Hi, my name is Chris Thompson, and today I want to make a case that one of the strangest discoveries in modern physics actually strengthens one of the oldest claims in Christian theology, that God exists beyond time itself. For most of history, people assumed time was simple. Newton described it as absolute, flowing the same way for everyone and everywhere all the time. Then Einstein came along in 1905 and 1915 and completely upended that. He showed that time is relative. It bends depending on how fast you're moving and how strong the gravity around you is. And this isn't just theory, it's been tested. Atomic clocks and GPS satellites prove it every single day. Here's what it looks like in practice. A clock moving near the speed of light runs measurably slower than a clock at rest, and a clock deep in a strong gravitational field, say close to a planet, runs slower than a clock farther away. This is why satellites have to constantly correct their onboard clocks. If they didn't account for every relativity, your GPS would be off by miles within a day. Now here's where it gets theologically interesting. In the 1970s, physicists Roger Penrose and Stephen Hawking proved something remarkable. If general relativity is correct, the universe must have begun at singularity, a single point where space-time, matter, energy all came into existence together. That means there is no before the Big Bang. Time itself starts there. It's not that matter exploded into empty pre-existing time and space. Time and space themselves begun. So here's the question this raises. Where does that leave God? Christian theologians have argued about this for centuries. One camp says God is timeless, completely beyond time with no past, present, or future. The other camp says God is temporal, that he exists inside time, generally responding to us moment by moment. Philosopher William Lane Craig offers a compelling middle position. He argues God is timeless without creation, but temporal since creation, meaning God enters into time at the very moment he brings the universe and time itself into being. I think this view takes what relativity teaches us seriously. Time isn't some eternal container that even God has to live inside. It's something that was made. Here's my central argument. If God is essentially and necessarily temporal, he needs time in order to exist. But relativity tells us that time itself began at the Big Bang. So a fully temporal God runs into a real problem. Either he's temporal with no time to exist in prior to creation, which doesn't make sense, or his very being is somehow tied to the same physical universe he's supposed to have freely created. Neither option fits comfortably with the God described in Genesis, who exists necessarily and creates freely. Now, a fair objection here is, how can a timeless God actually do anything? Doesn't acting require a before and after? Here's the response. God's timelessness only applies to existence prior to creation. Once creation happened, God freely enters into time and relates us genuinely within it. So the objection actually mixes up two separate questions, whether God is temporal now versus whether his own existence required time before creation ever happened. Another objection, doesn't this idea of timeless God come more from Greek philosophy than from the Bible, which describes God's grieving, remembering, and responding? That's a fair historical point. But those descriptions are widely understood across the theological spectrum and through morphic language, describing God in terms that we can relate to, not making a precise metaphysical claim by his nature. And importantly, my argument here doesn't start from Greek philosophy at all. It starts from physics. Time began. That's a scientific starting point, not a philosophical import. A more technical objection, relativity tells us observers disagree about simultaneity There's no single universal now. So how could God relate to a universe like that? Here's the key. My argument doesn't depend on whether there's one privilege now. It only claims that space-time as a whole, the entire four-dimension package, every reference frame included, had a beginning. That claim survives the complexities of relativistic simultaneity completely untouched. So where does this leave us? Einstein's relativity did far more than adjust some equations about the light and gravity. It revealed that time itself is a physical, contingent thing with a beginning. And that discovery, reached with no theological motive whatsoever, lines up remarkably well with what Christians have said about God for 2,000 years, that He isn't just one more being aging alongside His creation. He's the transcendent creator. He's the transcendent creator who exists beyond time as a source far from threatening fate. Relativity gives us one of modern science's most striking confirmation that time had a beginning, and whatever exists beyond that beginning must, by definition, be eternal.